Hi again. In our previous video, talking about this book, D.S. Russell, the Old Testament Pseudepigrapha, Patriarchs and Prophets in Early Judaism, we looked at the way that the intertestamental literature, the books that are rejected from the canon, the so-called Pseudepigrapha or Pigrapha, why were they rejected ultimately? Well, they disagreed with the take of the Old Testament and the New Testament, because Pseudepigrapha is both New Testament and Old Testament related, in that the books were put together, most of them between 200 BC and 200 AD. So this time we're looking at Josephus. What did he make of the saints of the Old Testament and also the rabbinic literature that followed Josephus? In Josephus, Russell says the Jewish historian Josephus, who lived from AD 37 to 100, who acknowledges his indebtedness for much of his material to earlier writers, is equally fulsome in his praise, that is, of patriarchs and prophets. He describes Abraham, for example, as a man of ready intelligence on all matters, with loftier conceptions of virtue than the rest of mankind, and skilled in celestial phenomena. This is all from Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews. He is a man of extreme sagacity, gifted with high intelligence, who introduced the Egyptians to arithmetic and transmitted to them the laws of astronomy. A man in every virtue supreme, who received from God the due meed of honor for his zeal in his service. The same high praise is heaped on Moses, who gave signal proof of his merits, his sagacity, his gallantry, and his power to perform miracles. The biblical narrative is in places amplified with legendary tales extolling his wisdom or courage or wondrous character. In this last connection, the story is told how the Egyptian princess who adopted him brought the child to the Pharaoh and laid him in her father's arms, suggesting that he might be recognized as heir to the throne. As he hugged the child, to please his daughter, he placed his diadem on the boy's head, whereupon the young Moses tore it off and flung it to the ground, where he trampled it underfoot. Two Midrashim say that he snatched the diadem from the king's head. This, says Josephus, was taken as an omen of evil import to the kingdom. In other places, the biblical narrative is expurgated, and Moses is exonerated for misdeeds assigned to him there. Thus, no mention is made of his having slain an Egyptian. The reason for his having to flee from Egypt is put down to the hatred of the Egyptian people and the envy of the king. Now, the rabbinic literature. Another valuable source of evidence is the rabbinic literature, which, in its written form, postdates the intertestamental period, but reflects an oral stage of development which may be used to cast light on the Judaism of those years. Of special interest are the Haggadic Midrashim, an exegesis or development of the biblical stories, containing ethical and religious teaching, and well spiced with folklore and legendary material. And the Targumim, that is Targums, translations or paraphrases of the Hebrew scriptures for use in the synagogue services. In these and in other related sources, the same trends appear. The patriarchs become the subject of story and legend, in which their virtues are extolled far beyond the record of Scripture. Thus Abraham, from Ur the Chaldees, is miraculously rescued from a fiery furnace into which the Chaldean king had thrown him. In the Hebrew word Ur, that is Ur, means flame, and he is rewarded by God for not taking part in idolatry. No record of this, of course, in Genesis. As a child, says a later legend, this same Abraham, under threat of death, had been hidden in a cave and fed by the angel Gabriel. He was indeed a wonder child, for at the age of 20 days it was found he could both walk and talk. Much is said about the merit that accrued to Abraham. Even his faith in God is so regarded, which more than made up for any misdemeanors on his part. Abraham himself was all too aware of this, as the 3rd century AD Midrash makes clear. The patriarch has a vision of the Messianic age in which he sees God seated on his throne with the Messiah on his right and Abraham himself on his left. When Abraham expresses misgivings that the place of honor has been given to the Messiah, God reminds him that he himself is sitting at the Patriarch's right hand. Many references are made to Jewish lore, to the chastity of Joseph and his strength in resisting temptation. One of these concerns the spelling of the name Joseph in Psalm 81, verse 6, which introduces an H between the first two letters of the word. This, say the rabbis, is a letter from the sacred Tetragrammaton, YHIH, or WH, for Yahweh, and is inserted into Joseph's name as a mark of esteem. Another version says it was done because Joseph, in a single night, had been able to learn from Gabriel all the 70 languages of the earth. As for Moses, through him the law had been made known, not just the written law, but the oral law as well, for together they contained and conveyed the one revelation of true religion. But not only was Moses responsible for receiving the law and making it available to Israel, he was responsible too for making it known to the whole Gentile world. For, according to one tradition at least, it was Moses himself who translated it into the language of the 70 nations on earth. The story of his assumption into heaven and after the matter of Enoch and Elijah appears in several guises. According to Samaritan tradition, he is to be the model of the coming Taheb, or Messiah, in fulfillment of the prophecy of Deuteronomy 18:15, which speaks of the coming of a prophet like Moses. Like Elijah, it is said elsewhere, he will return at the end of the days, or else they will make their appearance side by side. For a number of these illustrations, I am indebted to Louis Ginzberg, The Legends of the Jews, and a book called Stephen, a Singular Saint by a Martin H. Scharlemann. For the use of rabbinic sources in the study of early Judaism, see Jacob Neusner, Judaism, the Evidence of the Mishnah, and his other book, Early Rabbinic Judaism. So we see that the tendency, the trend in this intertestamental literature is to not just glorify the ancients, the patriarchs and prophets, but to actually divinize them. And in this, we see a disturbing trend. If we come from a cult background, like I do, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, you realize that it's all about exalting men, even deifying your founders, which, of course, at the same time tends to demote God and especially Christ. So the Watchtower, for one, is in a dishonorable tradition. I'll put in a link to another Russell, C.T. Russell, the founder of the Watchtower, and how he was regarded, even within a generation of the founding of the Watchtower. His followers had come to recognize him as the faithful and discreet slave, they said, predicted by Jesus, and also was the man with the writer's inkhorn in Ezekiel, called the modern Ezekiel, and even referred to Russell as the voice of Jehovah. This all in the book, The Finished Mystery. So I'll put in a link to that specific video with text from The Finished Mystery, but also to the Finished Mystery playlist for those interested in the early history of one of the great cults of the 20th century. See you next time.